I was brought in because the business wasn't performing at that time. So it was an underperforming business, well invested. So I didn't have the luxury of just recruiting new people. And just because you tell people to start working as a team, they don't start working as a team. So it has been a huge cultural transformational journey that we've been going on and through. And we're not over yet.
Hi, I'm Belden Menkus. Welcome to the Purposeful Strategist, the podcast that shifts the conversation about purpose and strategy from what organizations should do to what business leaders actually are doing and what they've learned along the way. My guest today is Dr. Philo Daniel, Chief Executive Officer of LPA Group, an engineering specialist in electronic and electro-mechanical components and systems, predominantly used in transport, aerospace, defense, and infrastructure. LPA has grown significantly since its founding in 1861, and today it operates across 4 UK sites. Philo joined LPA at the start of 2025 with a clear brief: to drive change in an organization that needed a new direction. To that challenge, Philo brings a wealth of experience as a leader in technology-intensive sectors, including as Regional Director at Thales and Global Director at Smiths Detection. Philo, welcome to the Purposeful Strategist.
Thank you very much, Belden. I'm really excited to be here today.
Good, likewise. So to start, if you can kind of say a bit about what LPA does, because I've read a whole bunch of words there, but to be honest, if somebody came to me and said, yeah, but what do they really do? I'd be struggling.
Okay, so we are really an engineering company and a manufacturing company. And then we bring those two together and we operate in a couple of different sectors. So it's very specialized equipment for rail, for aviation, and for aerospace and defense. So we make all of the electronics lighting within the trains. We make the jumper cables that communicate between carriages and a train. We provide the connectors and the ground power for airplanes, small and large, across the globe. And we also provide weight and space-saving components, both for rail as well as for aerospace and defense. So a really broad range of products and solutions are being offered across our portfolio.
So if I were in an airport
and
walking down the boarding ramp and I saw that there were some big cables stuck in the side of an airplane, that might be one you made.
Yeah, and you know what? I get quite conscious every time I step out of an aircraft now. I do look to see, is that an LPA connector? It's quite visually striking. It is one of the leading connectors, so I expect good aircraft, good airports to actually have one of those operating in their facilities.
So sorry, I'm going to push you a little. So if I'm getting on a plane and it's not one of yours, should I be worried?
No.
Okay.
It is only to ensure that the plane has adequate power and it's not using the corrosive fuel that would otherwise be burning and polluting the air around. So it's about using the electrical power to do all of the ground operations, and that's essentially what our connectors do.
And it's just, again, so I've kind of got it. You talk through a number of things, but it sounds like a lot of these connector ideas, whether it's rail car to rail car or airplane to ground, or is that sort of your special areas where the bits fit together?
Well, one of our centers of excellence, one of our production facilities, that's its specialization, its connectors and we've looked at diversifying with that as the core. There is another facility that does all things electronics and the smallest of little components, including LEDs, that come together, and that forms the internal lighting systems and the electronics within the railways.
So it's a number of different things. So when you came into LPA about 18 months ago, what brought you there, and what did you find when you got there?
So the first thing, I wasn't looking for a change, but it seemed like a really exciting opportunity. And I felt there is a lot of different solutions. And I really felt like I wanted to know more about it. And the only way to get more under the skin of LPA was to be part of it. And hence I joined. So I suppose it's about just understanding the capability. It's a business that's been around, as you said, since 1861. Doesn't mean that it's continued doing what it started off doing, which was street lighting in Brixton, for example, or knife and industrial connectors, which we still make. So there's a lot of old legacy products that have evolved over time, and there's a lot of new products. A lot of them have happened organically, and a lot of them have happened also via acquisition, and it has become part of the broader LPA group. So for me, coming in, I had to sort of understand what was the core capability and what more can we do with it, or how can we clean it up, and really rationalization so that we are focused and clear in terms of the direction that we can and should go in terms of framing how does growth look like and how can I shape this company, which is very, very diversified, if you want to call it that.
So I kind of want to get onto that in a minute, but if you don't mind, could we just sort of zoom in a bit? You're showing up. It sounds like you knew a bit about LPA before you took over as CEO, but how'd you go about kind of reading the situation? How did you actually kind of figure out what was happening there?
I suppose it was a combination. Of course, there was information from the board, there was information from the executives at that point, getting really, getting stuck into the detail, understanding the products, understanding who the customers were, speaking with all the different individuals within the team, really listening. I think that's absolutely key. When you start a new position, coming from a very large company, or, that was essentially my heritage, was very large top tier companies, coming to a really smaller footprint listed company though. And what does that mean? And so I really took my time to understand, listen, and make some quick changes as well, because time was not my best friend at the time.
Right.
I needed to really propel the organization forward in a positive way.
So if you don't mind, let's get a sense of size there. So listed business, revenue, employees, 4 sites, but what does that really mean?
So 160 people, majority in the UK, revenue this year aiming for 28 million. Huge growth since last year. When I started, we didn't achieve our numbers. We were more like 21 million. So it's a huge growth between last year and this year.
Yeah, that's big pickup.
Yeah, I don't expect to have that sort of 25% or so growth every year, but I would at least expect organically to have a growth of about in the double digits. I'd be looking at 10-15% year on year organically. Plus, I'd be looking at acquisitions to strengthen and give me that scale to kind of make more sense of the business.
If you had to boil the strategy down into something fairly simple, what would you say the strategy is today? What are you trying to achieve, and what does success look like?
So straight off the first month of me being in the company, I thought, we need to do something. If I'm going to have an objective that I set a vision for the company, I think we need to be quite aggressive. We need to be quite ambitious. So I straight away said, you know what? We should look to double the size of this company within 3 years' time. And that is essentially the vision that was set. How will we do that? We will do that organically with our existing business up to a certain point. But for the last part, I would need to have an acquisition. So something at least half the size of LPA today.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Would something quite substantial, because that will then definitely more than double the size of the business. And that is the direction that we are definitely on the path for.
Again, I'm sort of imagining a bit of this. Given what you said, I'd assume it's also kind of electrical, electromechanical, engineered product, same sectors or different sectors?
There's a couple of different things. I think one of the, if I just go back a step in terms of what happened when I first went to LPA, because the company, as you've said, across 4 sites, I didn't feel that it was big enough to have 4 divisions, essentially. So what we did straight away was I announced what I call the One LPA vision. Within the first month, I said, do you know what? We need to reorganize. We need to reorganize in such a way that we can leverage the capability across all of the sites and across all of the expertise that we have across the organization. So I reorganized into a functional, departmental kind of organization where all the engineering and technical teams were under one head. All of the sales and marketing teams were under one. Operations and supply chain under one head. However, of course, operations is very specific per site when there's production going on. But there was no reason why the other team members couldn't really share experiences, learn, develop. So that became the foundation of our baseline for our strategy. In terms of straight off, we sort of said, why are we here? So we went back to the purpose. Why are we here? What are we planning to achieve? Let's revise our vision and our mission. So after the first month of sitting, listening, learning, understanding the business, that was immediately the move that I sort of set upon. Easier said than done.
Yeah, I was going to say, so was that greeted by wild enthusiasm and you being carried on everybody's shoulders through the streets, or a little bit of, so tell us again why we're doing this?
Well, do you know what? We're on the journey. I would say 18 months on, we're still on the journey. I think what ended up happening was we ended up identifying lots of different gaps within the organization, which you can't fill immediately because I couldn't just increase my headcount. I was brought in because the business wasn't performing at that time. So it was an underperforming business, well invested, but underperforming with good capability, good customers. So I needed to make money. So you can't, I didn't have the luxury of just recruiting new people. So lots of gaps with the new reorganization. And just because you tell people to start working as a team, they don't start working as a team. So it has been a huge cultural transformational journey that we've been going on and through. And we're not over yet. You know, it's about, I think I've learned to be patient, because if I want something that's going to be resilient and long-standing, I need to be patient and structured in my approach and do it systematically. And that's essentially what we've been sort of doing systematically over the last 12 plus months. Yeah.
It sounds a bit like you were there, you spent an intensive sort of listening, learning month or so, and then here was the strategy. Was anyone else involved in that, or was it kind of as it sometimes is, CE goes in a room and comes out and there it is?
No. What I did was I called all my direct reports at the time and their direct reports. So, you know, we had an extended leadership team and we came together. This was perhaps my week 6. And we went through a couple of days of sort of really sort of saying, you know, understanding what's good about this place, what's not so good, how can we change it? What should we change? What's great? Let's keep it. We also then looked at the values of, are these still relevant to us as we stand today? Do we want to evolve and do we want to change that? And so it was a collective workshop and outputs from that workshop that then drove the new sort of drew a line in the sand and said, this is our vision, this is our mission, these are our values, and this will be our combined purpose as we move forward.
So Philo, that's a really useful picture of how you got there. But how do you get all that to stick? How do people know something's really changed?
So once we had reset our strategy, we agreed that our previous brand wasn't representative of the company that we were today and where we wanted to take it. So we engaged with an external brand strategy agency, and they supported us in developing the new LPA Group brand. This was a process that lasted several months. We looked at how are we positioned against our competitors? How do we want our customers to see us? And also, does the brand personality align with our own values? And then we launched our brand last summer. It's more than a logo. It's a completely fresh and modern look and feel of how we represent ourselves internally and externally as well.
And are you seeing that, you know, strategies are sort of meant to be, in some ways, an enduring sense of direction, and often, as they say, sort of run into reality and have to be rewritten. Are you imagining that as you go forward with this strategy, you'll periodically bring whatever the current top level of the organization is at that time together to do an equivalent, maybe not quite the same, but do an equivalent?
No, absolutely. It's got to be a collective. If I don't have the minds and hearts of the rest of the organization with me, I won't be able to achieve anything. I always say I'm only as good and I can only be successful as the team that I've got with me, and then their teams as well. I set the vision and the direction with inputs from all of the individuals and keeping the market in mind, obviously. And then we look to deliver and achieve it together. So it's an annual event. So whilst that was an initial kickoff, then we did a strategic session in the middle of last year, and then we've done another one just recently monthly as well, which is a strategic planning session is what I call it, where I get input from all of the different functions, different levels to just say, okay, what are our numbers looking like? How do we adjust it? Whilst last year was all about bringing it together and consolidating the various departments, this year it's all about growth. It's all about new innovation. It's about acquisition targets, and it's very exciting. So we are evolving, but we're not doing it. I'm not doing it in a closed room or on my own. Definitely not.
No, I think that makes an awful lot of sense. Do you mind my asking if you used any outside support for those various kind of workshop-y events? Because with a lot of people, as a chief exec, it can be a little tricky to try and do it all yourself.
So I have someone in my team who's very good at facilitation and was brought into the organization around just after I started last year. You need someone with a different sort of perspective to keep everyone honest and guide them along and do, help with the Post-it notes and the ideation and collecting the themes. So no, I did have help, but I'm lucky that they're part of the organization.
That's brilliant. Sorry, a bit off piste here, but just curious. Do you think that's something every chief exec ought to be thinking, I need somebody internal who can do this? Or is it sort of you just happen to be lucky and had somebody with that skill set?
I think you definitely need someone to help facilitation, but I think there's merits to having both an internal and an external person, because I would consider having someone external to get us to think a little bit differently and use different methodologies or toolkits or tool sets that they might have. So I would say that they both would be useful, but it's also, you don't want to get too diversified in your thinking, because then that can become really hard to start aligning as well.
Yeah.
But if you need support with clarity because it's not working with what you have internally, then I would definitely look at going external.
Yeah. Very interesting. I know that what I'm going to say next may be a little paradoxical for somebody who's a consultant, but I think often organizations rely too much on external support when they could have. The way I sometimes describe it is you give your best career building opportunities away to external people who you didn't know before and you're never going to see again. How about we invest in the people we've got and let them have a go? So I think it's great. I think it's really great. I think sometimes we lose out on, collectively as a country, as an economy, we lose out on the skills that can be developed when organizations take a bit more of a chance on their own people.
Yeah, I suppose, Belden, I think it's also because in my previous roles, even though it was in large companies, whether it was Thales or Smiths Detection, I probably did the strategy myself. In the roles that I was in, I worked with the team and shaped it, and I might have even done some of the facilitation with sort of wider team. So I think because that comes quite naturally for me. Perhaps one of the reasons I was brought into LPA, I have the faith in having someone facilitate, because then I can also shape it from there onwards. So perhaps it's just a personal skill is there as well.
Very good. If you don't mind, let me change the direction just a little bit.
Okay.
So your business, you design and build, engineer, manufacture components that fit in a lot of really critical places. So do you think of LPA as a business with a social remit or a social purpose, or is it really just about making money?
I think the social aspect, I think I look at it in a different way. I'd say we give back to the community because I'm a huge advocate of STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths outreach, and apprenticeships. And I think we have a duty of care to our society to share that information. We struggle to recruit talented engineering, skilled technicians, skilled engineers. We don't struggle to hire people from an accountancy profession, for example. So when I think of social sort of responsibility, it is more in the outreach in terms of educating, extending awareness of STEM, attracting apprentices into LPA. We've just launched our STEM outreach program so that we can actually get structured work experience for high school students. We partner with local colleges and local schools to encourage that. So I would say that in terms of that is us giving back to the community. also partnering with every location where we have a site. The team there have identified their preferred charity to support, which we raise money for. So I'd say, giving back to the community is absolutely important. Are we doing that in terms of the products and solutions we sell? Well, I would say it's in terms of the team itself. It's about investing in them, investing in their capability to make them relevant for today's society, because what was suitable 5 years ago, 10 years ago isn't relevant today as much. So we have to keep up that skill set. But if you look at broader in terms of some of the solutions we offer, lighter, smaller, consuming less fuel, electric power for planes so that they're not burning fuel, that is definitely from an environmental perspective. So I'm reaching a little bit here, but it's definitely, there's different angles in terms of what we are doing from a social perspective.
Can I throw one at you just to get a reaction? The UK, if you go back far enough, was a world leader in manufacturing. It almost sort of invented manufacturing. And yet there's certainly a kind of a rumor going around that it doesn't do manufacturing. LPA is one great example. There are lots of, when you start to look, of really stunning world-class, often somewhat smallish, unfortunately, but really world-class manufacturing, engineering, design and build businesses. And it feels to me like finding a way to rebalance our economy so there's a bit more of that wouldn't be a bad thing. Does any of that kind of resonate, or is it like, well, that's great, but that's not our job?
No, absolutely. I say, what is the point of UK manufacturing? You don't get much support from the local government or the government per se. What is the benefit of being, I say we are a vertically integrated site because we make everything from raw materials through to the end product. Is there a benefit if there's the sovereign aspect of a product being built in the UK isn't appreciated? Maybe not, because we get squeezed in terms of margins. We have to still make money at the end of the day. As I've said, we are a AIM-listed company, which means we're on the London Stock Exchange, and I'm accountable to my shareholders, and I have to still make money. So if it's best for me to make money by offshoring, outsourcing, and not manufacturing as much because it's cheaper from another low-cost country, that's what a lot of our competition have done. And so I do question, where is it important? And to be fair, we have won contracts because we are a UK manufacturer. And so that's great, and we take great pride in that. And I'd love to see more contracts like that be awarded to maintain and sustain UK manufacturing so that we can invest back in the talent and in the capability and the competency to sustain it, to make it survive this onslaught of cheaper goods that might flood the country.
Yeah, I can hear the energy coming to what you're saying. I get excited about it. I do want to though pick up on something you pointed to there, which is the vertically integrated nature of the business. I mean, that's in some ways it's almost going against the trend of the last few decades of, as you say, sort of outsourcing things, and we'll have this part made there, and we'll have this other part made there because that's the cheapest place. But what are the strategic challenges or benefits of being vertically integrated?
So when COVID happened, it was like onshoring was the word used because supply chain was so, it fell apart during COVID. But people have forgotten about that. So very soon we've fallen back into our old habits. But then obviously with some of the conflicts around the world at the moment, that word has started re-emerging in terms of onshoring, having control of and understanding where is your supply chain, what is a risk, how are you mitigating it? So I think there are definitely benefits. And I think when I speak about the sovereignty, I feel for contracts that need control of that supply chain. Primarily defense, that is an area that we are looking to pivot into. So strategically, that makes sense. So who would value that local supply chain and that local vertically integrated organization? It would need to be someone who wants it to be locally made and not reliant on, political world sort of situations that are currently occurring. Yeah. And that has to definitely come into the strategy of, do I want to continue to be vertically integrated? If so, I can't be competitive where a customer doesn't appreciate that. I need to find a customer that does. Either that, or I jump on the bandwagon of everyone else, which would be a shame. So it's about balancing it and understanding where should I really take the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I assume that's a topic that you're already working on and thinking on and will play out over a period of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talk to me in
Yeah.
a few years' time.
Good. So one of the things you mentioned before, you've kind of tried to get the conversation internally focused around customer-focused innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And what culturally, in terms of leadership, what needed to happen to get success around that?
So I think in the last couple of years, I would say there wasn't as much investment in our technical engineering capability. So we've ended up acquiring products and innovation into the company. But what we've done in the last year and a half is we have strengthened our technical engineering team. We've brought them all together. We've connected with customers. We're connecting with via the sales team out there to understand what are the customers' pain points, what would they benefit from, and incorporating that into the design. And because we're small, we have the agility. We can turn things around quickly. So when I appointed my technical and engineering director in mid last year, I said, do you know what I need? I just need a couple of new products to be launched within the next year. And we are launching new products at the moment. So, and these are very much based on specific customers' needs, which we can then become a product range that we can then continue to market. So it's been quite a shift in terms of what has been happening to what we've done and the change we've brought within the year.
I guess one other thing I wouldn't mind touching on is sort of you and your own leadership approach and style. So as we discussed, you've had a career, moving in some pretty big organizations. Sounds like you've a little bit treated your own little bit of it like, well, this is my, kind of my thing, and I'm going to come up with my own strategy and all. But did you have to sort of find a different gear, a different way of working, moving into a much smaller organization?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to explain. I didn't know what to expect at all. Right? It's not like going into a big corporate, sitting down and you're one in thousands. No, it wasn't like that at all. And whilst all the companies I've worked for in the past made things, I've never been sat amongst a manufacturing site, which is where the head office is. So it's very different. It's to reestablish myself in a way. Like, who am I? And I think what I realized very quickly is I need to stay true to myself. I'm not just suddenly the CEO, so I'm untouchable. But whilst I get into the detail to understand, to connect with people, to listen, I have to also remember I have to step away from it to make sure I have that thinking time to be strategic, to understand what's going on geopolitically, to understand what's happening in terms of the regulatory market, to take time to speak with shareholders, investors, etc. So it's about the balance between both sides. So I've never led a company. I've never had an entire organization dependent on what I might do next in terms of strategic direction, etc. It's different when you're with a larger company because you've got the big blanket of the larger company sort of protecting you in a way, even if I was doing senior roles. It is so different, but scary as well.
Sounds like one of those scary, fun kind of things.
Yeah, but I take information and I listen to my leadership team, and I agree, or I bring them into the picture as well of, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? I just don't go and just do stuff because, as I've said before, I can only achieve things if I take people on the journey with me.
Yeah. You talked about being publicly listed, and you're probably not the smallest publicly listed company in the UK, but it's a bit on the
tiny.
small side. And sorry, I've having spoken to other chief execs of small listed companies, I know it has its challenges. How are you finding that? What's the good and the maybe less good about being publicly listed at a slightly smaller size?
I suppose being publicly listed means that you've got, the shareholders own the company and, you've got that investment in the company. However, it's undervalued compared to the assets of the company. And I think a lot of UK small cap is currently undervalued. So there's a bit of work, I think, from the regulatory perspective for the small cap market, because there's the investment and the knowledge for people to invest in the AIM-listed companies isn't there for the commitment from the investment community. So there's a little bit of work to do. But whilst I was watching the share prices go up and down and then looking at the small market cap and all of that, I was told all you need to do is deliver. Set your plans, achieve it, deliver, and then the rest will follow. Yeah. So I'm not watching and looking at the share price on a daily basis because it fluctuates with very minimal movement in the market. I'm just focused on delivering on the strategy now with the team and achieving the vision that we plan to achieve. And I believe if I did that together with the team, then we will get the results will follow.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty good way of thinking about most businesses. Do you do factory tours?
Yes.
And if somebody like me were interested, how would they go about, how does that work?
So usually a factory tour would be for someone who's just about to start with the company. We might take them around. We would take shareholders or investors around potentially to show them what the factory is about. But yeah, if there was a particular reason for what you're interested to see, because you mentioned about the interest in UK manufacturing, I'd be happy to show you around. I'll just have to let our operations team know so I don't get in trouble.
They're allowed to come back and go, no, it's health and safety. Can't have them.
Oh, you'll get a induction, short induction.
Yes, no, a site induction. Yeah, of course. I guess a couple of thoughts in my mind. One is a lot of people don't understand what goes on in a factory. Many people have never been, unless you work in one, you don't even know how does it work? What happens? And I think it's something that more people really ought to know.
Yeah.
There's things like retailing. We all kind of have some sense of we know how retailing works because we all go buy things in shops. Whereas factories are often, they're a bit tucked away. They're somewhere on a site someplace. Not always, but often.
Yeah.
Big building that you don't know what goes on in there. Lorries show up at one end, they show up at another end. What happens in the middle? So I hope you don't mind. I'm gonna ask if there's any listeners who would like to go on an LPA tour to get in touch, and I'll try and bundle them together, and we'll see if there's a way to make that happen.
Yeah, we will accommodate.
That'd be brilliant. Look, I've really enjoyed hearing both about your journey and about where you're trying to go with LPA, and both the sort of the local things you're doing, but also the kind of some of the bigger economic issues that you're grappling with. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else you'd like to either dig into or you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I suppose the reason for all this change within LPA is to take a long-standing British engineering and manufacturing company into its next chapter for resilient growth. So setting a strategy, as you know, Belden, is relatively straightforward. Executing it and delivering it against a cultural backdrop is much harder. And that has been, and it's challenging for many other organizations across the UK. So that set us upon many firsts within LPA. And some of them include, we got our first HR. We started doing an annual barbecue against one of our core values. We developed an annual award ceremony to celebrate our team members against the values. We have our brand, and then we have, our commitment to our STEM outreach, our chosen charities. So all of this should allow us to move forward, to energize and empower our teams to work together to deliver on that strategy. So there is a bit of a method to the madness.
Well, that's great. I love to hear about businesses that are both kind of carrying on their tradition, their heritage, but also reinventing themselves for the future. I really love heritage stories with that picture of the future.
Thank you, Belden. Thank you.
And I'm going to look forward to hearing how you take it further on from here. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Belden.
Really appreciate it.
Been great. Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Purposeful Strategist. In addition to being available on our website, you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, please do follow us and leave a 5-star review. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, and join us soon for the next episode of The Purposeful Strategist.